Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start the May 4th, gosh, May 4th already, meeting of Planning and Zoning. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Clerk, can you please read the roll, please?
Chairwoman Spidell.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chairman Richardson.
Here.
Secretary Grant.
Here.
Member Perez.
Here.
Member Rice. Member Aton.
Here.
Riley.
Here.
Alternate Member Faison.
Here.
Alternate Member Childs.
Thank you so much. First order of business is to approve the minutes from April 20th, 2022, please. Do I have a motion? Secretary Grant.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes from April 20th, 2022.
Do I have a second? Member Faison?
I second.
Thank you, sir. Everyone say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Member Richardson. Just checking your controls. Okay, excellent. Okay. Staff, we're going to go to 9A CUP 1-2022, building height in the UV zoning district, 3550 South Washington Avenue.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good evening, Commissioners. This item begins on page 9 of 91. The applicant, Lisa McCotter, on behalf of the property owner, Jesse Wright, is requesting a conditional use permit, CUP, to increase the allowable height of 2 multifamily buildings and 1 7-story hotel. Per section 28-106 of the Land Development Regulations, buildings over 60 feet in height require a conditional use permit in the Urban Village UV zoning district. The recommended conditions of approval are 1, that the height of buildings G and the hotel shall be reduced or relocated to meet the setback requirements described in section 28-106C1. And 2, the site plan shall demonstrate low impact development, LID techniques, or facilities that increase stormwater treatment at least 10% more treatment volume than required by the Land Development Regulations. Again, that's section 28-106C. So just to summarize this item, on March 16th, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval of an ordinance establishing the incentives to be required as part of a conditional use permit for buildings over 60 feet and under 100 feet in height. The applicant is requesting a CUP under this section and proposes option C to add LID stormwater management. The conditions are shown on page 17 and are proposed to ensure the standards for conditional uses are met related to setbacks and height, and that the LID incentives be part of this conditional use permit. Additionally, just wanted to add that an excerpt from the US 1 corridor study plan is available in your agenda star related to this site.
Thought we talked about the agenda stars, sir. I have also failed to ask council to read the rules of participation. Can we go backwards, please?
Not a problem.
Thank you.
All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. Please be advised that the following board members, Linwood V. Rice and Thomas Perez, are dual members for the Planning and Zoning Commission and Titusville Environmental Commissions, and these board members are permissible participants at each of these respective board meetings. Both of the items on the agenda are CUPs, and for the quasi-judicial confirmation procedures, we have that the following items are subject to quasi-judicial rules of procedure. Anyone wishing to speak on any of these items must first sign a public hearing agenda card and sign the oath contained thereon. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the planning and zoning to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Submit these exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, can you return to page 17 of 91 on this issue, please? Forgive me for my oversight. Mr. Eddy, are you finished with your presentation, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McCotter, would you like to speak on this issue, please? Mr. Wright? How are those frequent flyer miles going? Thank you so much, Mr. Wright.
Good evening. If I may take about 3 minutes to discuss the package that I just passed out, and we also have about 3 minutes of the video as to what the project looks like, so you get a better flavor as to what is going to be there. So let me start off on the first page. And so what is the definition of a woman? I'm sorry, I meant to say, what is the definition of height? So the building, all three buildings are around 75 feet with the staircase and the elevator shaft that's going to take us to about 15 feet. So if I may approach the drawing, I can explain.
I think we need a higher easel. Is that better? Okay, yes. A little better, yes.
So right now, building
One. I think your manager would do an yeah, perfect. Yes, we might have to get you an easel for these. Okay.
Building, so if we go based on, you should be okay in all three buildings. But if the definition of the height, and you see that on the second page, why the city members, actually the third page, you'll see emails from the fire department, fire marshal, and also the building department to identify the height being 74.9, then we should be okay. So there's some ambiguity right now going through P&Z and the city council, whether 74.9 is going to be used for the height or 90 feet. If it is 90 feet, then obviously the setback based on the staff, we are short by about, say, 8 feet on this side here from the property line. And we're short by about 12 feet, 78 plus 12, about 12 feet from the property line here. So I'm just hoping that, just like what it says in those two emails, that we would be going by 74.9, not 80 feet. So we're done with this. If you have any questions on this before I go to the next. Yes.
Mr. Perez.
Yeah, I don't understand why the ambiguity, is it going to be 74.9 or is it going to be different?
So we asked that question, Mr. Perez, and the discussion is mainly finding out why is it that the height of the building is to be used as a reference to create the setback? Why would the setback be the exact height of a building? I don't understand. Staff may be able to respond to that, but I'm hoping that we will go with this so we can move forward and be done with the CUP, because we don't want any more monkey wrenches in this anymore. I think we have plenty.
Staff, can you clarify this, please, for all of us?
Yes, ma'am, sure, I can try. So the ordinance does say that a building over 60 feet but under 100 feet must be set back an equal distance of its height. The Florida Building Code defines the height of a building based on an average, and so what the applicant has proposed is a building that is 74-ish feet with a elevator shaft that could potentially go up to 90 feet. And so in that case, you do a weighted ratio of the heights. And so you wouldn't say it's a 74-foot tall building or it's a 90-foot tall building. In your staff report, it's included in the agenda tonight on page 11 in bold, we have the staff reviewed the application based on a building height of 90 feet. So I wanted to make it clear that if just a portion of the roof, where the elevator shaft is, if that's a small portion of the roof height, then the entire building is not looked at 90 feet in height. It's an average. So beyond that, at this point, we don't have a site plan to definitively determine what the setback will be based on the building height. And once we have that, we can give you some more guidance.
This is a geometry problem.
But regardless of the site plan, we've always asked for the height of 90 feet and a mid-rise. And as you see in the emails from two different departments, they define that as the highest level of a habitable, people that are living there versus people walking on the roof on the observation deck. I mean, that's just common sense. So we can't shift the buildings, we cannot move the streets, you know?
Mr. Perez has a question or a comment.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, back to staff. So you said it's an average. An average means taking, various different measurements and coming up with an average, but you said 90 feet is the average. Can you explain that?
So if the entire roof surface, 100% of the roof surface is at 74 feet, then that would be our building height. In this case, we have a building that is mostly 74 feet with an elevator shaft that raises that height beyond 74 feet. You take the percentage of the footprint of the roof at that height, that additional height, 90 feet. Let's just say as an example. Right, the area.
The percentage of the roof coverage.
And so it's the average of those two percentages together. No, sir. So if the entire roof surface, the footprint of the roof was at 90 feet, then yes, it would be 90. But in this case, only a small portion of the roof's footprint is at 90 feet where the elevator shaft is. The rest of the majority of the roof surface is at a lower height.
So what I'm asking is, why is you refer to an average of 90? Where does that come from?
Staff referred to 90 because the application did not come with a site plan that broke down exactly what the final average height would be. And so to analyze the site with a maximum possible presented height of
Okay.
90 feet, the analysis in your report says if the building has that final average of 90 feet, which in reality it may not, then it needs a 90-foot setback.
Right, so that's.
If the average is below 85, then an
I got it.
85-foot setback would be sufficient.
I got it. So the 80 that I see is probably what we're really talking about, the average. Is that correct?
Well, again, let me just discuss a little bit more in this sketch here.
Mr. Wright, can you hold off? Ms. Riley has a question
I just need to
first.
get this clarified for myself. So you don't have the dimensions of the elevator shaft and the roof to determine what that average height is?
Correct.
And you won't get that until you get the site plan? So what are we here about today, then?
The concept that the site plan hasn't been to the city, but we have a general idea of which is what is being presented tonight. And based on what has been presented to the city, staff analyzed with a maximum height of 90 feet, because that's what's been discussed in negotiations and in conversations with the applicant. And so the CUP will allow a particular building height, but the conditions that this board and city council must impose must meet the code that says if your building is 85 feet tall, then it needs to have an 85-foot setback. If you're going to have a 90-foot tall building, then it needs to have a 90-foot setback according to our code requirement. And so that's what you're analyzing to see if the application and request for a building height greater than 60 feet should be granted and what those conditions should be.
Okay, I thank
How
you.
can we submit a site plan not knowing what the height of the building is? It's like a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Gotta have the egg to have the chicken. How do we do that? That's why we're asking for 90 feet for the elevator shaft and the staircase. And by the way, can you come up with this? So the observation deck is going to be up here. Almost 7,000 square feet of observation deck is going to be up here on building G. The rest are going to be a bunch of air conditioning units and so on and so forth. So we have to bring the staircase and the elevator shaft only for 7,000 or 8,000 square feet. So people can actually see the rocket launching. On the senior living is going to be around 5,000, 6,000 square feet, not more. The hotel, this is a faulty roof. We don't have any pool there or anything, but it's going to be about 11,000 square feet, again with the elevator shaft and the staircase. And these are the three buildings. So first, I don't understand why the setback has to be exactly the same height. I don't get that. Second, for like 12 feet here and 5 feet here, are we going to be going back and forth? Are we going to get this thing moving forward?
Member Faison.
This question's for staff. Do you know Steve Adams? And so Steve Adams is a building official who has said that his building can still be a low-rise building but exceed the height of 75 feet. And in this question, he said, it is possible for a high-rise building to have a building height greater than 75. Right? So if it can be a high-rise, it can also be a mid-rise. So he can have a mid-rise building at 75 feet but still be greater than 75, if I'm reading this correctly. Meaning, because the key word here is, and as he stated, habitable. A habitable floor. Elevator shaft extending above 75 feet is not habitable.
An habitable floor is people that are living there. Occupied floor is where people are walking, watching they're not going to get on the elevator shaft and get up there 15 feet up and then fall down.
I got you.
Member Aton.
So, just for staff, I think, can this be addressed in a motion where the habitable building space not exceed 75 feet or 70, whatever, but the building height overall not exceed 90? Can we do that in a condition approval of the CUP?
Please say yes.
So again, the definition of building height in the Florida Building Code is the elevation of the roof surface. So it doesn't talk about habitable space in the definition of building height. You could make that motion. I'm not sure how that impacts this project. I'm trying to understand because
so we cannot exempt something or change something from the building code related to the setback as part of the CUP conditions?
A setback would, a change from the code requirement for the setback would require a variance.
Okay.
So it's not something this board has the authority to grant, because the code that was established by city council prescribes how permitting approvals can be granted. And so just to focus everyone on what the goal is for this particular agenda item, the recommendation is on page 17 with the 2 recommended conditions that staff has analyzed based on an analysis of a 90-foot tall building. Just keeping all of that in mind, that the buildings need to meet that setback requirement
Right.
unless a variance is granted. Now, if you wanted to say something about the variance process and the conditions where either they can be granted or can't, that you can restrict an applicant's ability to get a variance by a CUP, but I don't think that's the direction you're going in.
No,
I don't think you can do the opposite.
The recommendation just says the height, and that seems to be where discussion is the height 75 feet based on the habitable space, or is it the 90 feet based on the elevator space, or is it
It's the
So what-
average based on this
okay.
definition that you see from Steve
So,
Adams.
based on, and just as a question, so looking at his rendering there's a lot of roof space there, and an elevator shaft is pretty small. Does he get to count, he counts everything in that one building that the elevator shaft is in? Is that what gets to be counted?
My understanding is that the building that has the elevator shaft has something like 90-something% of a 70-something foot height, where the elevator shaft is about 90 feet, and the computation is only 2% of the total, or whatever the percentage of that square footage of the roof footprint for the elevator shaft is proportionate to the rest. So it would lower the average well below that maximum 90 from the elevator shaft. And so that determination is made when those building plans are submitted. And we just want the condition for the CUP to say that the approval for this particular item has a height that meets that code requirement.
Do we know, Mr. Wright or Rodney, what the magic number is on the, I assume both buildings aren't a problem, one of the 2 buildings
But all
that
of
have
them,
elevators?
all of them are basically, we're asking for 75 feet habitable.
Well,
and
are
90
you,
feet
but, so
include-
therefore you're asking for 75-foot setback. That's the number you have to, is that
We
accurate?
can make the 75 feet setback. That's not a problem.
If the math works out to 78 feet, or,
It really depends on, so I don't know if we can see this. If we, like, we're like 12 feet short here. If we move this building up, this road is gonna be crooked. The senior is not gonna be able to get through that little hallway. They're gonna get stuck between this building and that building. To be very honest with you. We cannot move this one up. We cannot move the hotel this direction. We're like 8 feet short. So that's really basically what they're talking about. What do we do with the shortage of 12 feet here and 5 feet here? Because 8 feet. We're 8 feet short from the property line. And I spoke with Chip, the owner of the car wash. He said, Jesse, I don't give a damn. You know, nobody's gonna be measuring 8 feet here, why we're short 8 feet. And here is about 12 feet. So this would affect the pool, the senior living, pushing this building up towards the country club. And we would lose parking spaces. We're
So-
very, very tight in the parking
yeah.
space.
So I think the issue is, based on what I'm hearing, you've got the wrong board. We can give you the CUP, and we can make it adhere to the building code, but you're gonna have to go through the average, figure out what the minimum setback you really need is to build the building you want and put it where you want. And then if you need a variance, you're gonna, is that accurate?
Yes, and I believe that the recommendation for the condition on page 17, number 1, is that it is drafted flexibly enough to allow the applicant to design the buildings with that average height that meets that setback. So I believe that when the staff report was generated with that 90-foot height maximum in mind, there may not have been, Right now, the renderings that are commented on in the staff report say that there's an 85-foot setback and that doesn't meet a 90-foot height. If the actual average is less than 85 feet, then there's no issue because the setback would be greater than the height. And so the condition says the height of buildings G and hotel shall be reduced or relocated unless they've already met it to meet the setback requirement described in section 28-106C1.
Okay, so maybe the one point of clarification, any issue, can we include the average height calculation as a reference in item 1, just so somebody
can.
doesn't come back and say, well, it's 90 feet, but it shouldn't really be? Because my guess is, just doing some quick math based on what it looks like there, even at the 74-foot plus such a small percentage of the elevator, you're going to be at like 76, 77 feet
Right.
of setback. It's not going to be that big of a change.
And to be frank, I would recommend that all 3 of the buildings have that same criteria for the condition that they meet the code requirement for that height setback.
May I ask the staff as to how they come up with the fact that the height of the building has to be the same as the setback?
It's in the ordinance. No, it's in the code ordinance. It doesn't have to be the same, but yeah, it's the minimum setback is the height of the, there's no formula other
And
than
again,
it's
what
a
is the
1-to-1.
definition of a woman? Or what is the definition of height? So we're gonna debate that. What is the height?
The building height definition is the vertical distance from grade plane to the average height of the highest roof surface. It's in your packet, Mr. Wright, on page 3.
I need to move on, but Mr. Wright, do you accept the recommendations from staff?
I would be happy to have a unanimous vote on the CUP and delay this to the city council meeting. I just have to cover 2 more things on the second page, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I just needed that clarification. Member Richardson, please.
I don't know if this question is for the staff. You've got to pardon me, I've been sick for a couple of weeks. Or should be addressed to Mr. Honeycutt. I'm worried about consistency. Titus Landings, the parish building, how tall is it?
With the flag. They have a flag.
And what's the setback distance between Harrison and the building and Hopkins in the building? Did the same rules apply when Titus Landings was built?
Excuse me.
The recent ordinance that was just passed did not exist when Titus Landing was passed, but we can look up that information. So there would be a different analysis under the code at this time,
So this,
because the code just recently changed.
okay, that explains some things.
The code previously required 50% open space to get a CUP higher than the height that was requested, and that was why the code was in part changed.
I was going to ask if we could do some horse trading on the top of the second page. Because when the staff came up with 4 conditions, 4 incentives, they asked us to pick 1, 2, 3, or 4. And we picked number 3, which is the stormwater retention. However, we are going to do the electric vehicle charging, 2 per every building. And we are going to also do the shading of 12 feet by 12 feet, 3 structures in all 3 buildings. So we're willing to give, if the staff are willing to give as well. We are going to be asking for 3 variants, and I want to bring this up now, so it won't be an issue with the staff later. We are not going to be able to make the buffer of 20 feet. We can only do 10, because that would affect the parking. And size of the parking spaces are going to be 9 by 18, not 10 by 20 per the code. Titus Landing asked for that, and I've measured it myself. and those are 9 by 18. So I don't see any reason why we won't be able to get that. And the third thing is the sign package. Hilton wants its own sign, separate from other sign, because we're marketing multiple tenants for people coming on US 1, the hotel, the apartment, the seniors. We have 6 components where Titus Landing only has medical and retail. So we need to have more visibility on US 1, and that's it. And with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, Rodney can take over, and we can watch the video if you'd like to do that now.
Do any commissioners have additional questions before the video and Mr. Honeycutt? Whom would you like to go first? Mr. Honeycutt or
Would
the
you mind
video?
if you look at the video, because it doesn't have any sound, so I have to explain what part is coming in.
That sounds
if that's
good.
okay.
Yes. Cue the video, please.
I didn't bring any popcorn. You're just going right from the US 1, and you see the first 2 restaurants, the drive-in restaurants and the sit-down restaurant, which is this, 5,000 square feet. Now it's moving towards the the road in between the front, US 1. It shows the True by Hilton, which is right behind the car wash. Excuse me. This is coming from Narvaz on the south side. You'll see the apartment building, 7-story on the left. That's building G. And the building to the right is Hilton, and this is a senior living, 7-story. The ground footprint of about 25,000 square feet. Now it's going to take you through the clubhouse and the pool. We will not have the jacuzzi. We will have a 2,500 square feet of a pool and a clubhouse 1,600 square feet. We're now coming from the country club from the north, in between the building F and G on the left and the commercial portion on the right. We're going in between the phase 1 and phase 2, which is the commercial. This is the underpass, 2-story, 40,000 square feet in each floor, 80,000 total. This is the parking lot facing Hopkins. See how beautiful it is? Or shall we leave Sears the way it is? I'm just kidding. This is a 20,000 square feet of a box facing Hopkins. We will be putting the antique mall there. And next to it would be a 10,000 square feet to the right, retail as well, facing Hopkins. And this is basically the parking lot, and now you're looking at the 2-story, 80,000 square feet. I should be getting a LOI from Parish Medical for about 10,000 square feet of the 80,000 in the back. So hopefully we have Parish Medical on the Hopkins side and the True Hilton on the US 1. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Honeycutt, please.
Is this one working?
It is.
Good evening. Rodney Honeycutt, 3700 South Washington Avenue in Titusville. I guess the first thing I'll do is talk about the height a little bit. I guess I should step back though. I assisted with the master plan, which you guys approved a few months ago, and also assisted Mr. Wright in getting the CUP for a urban village modified. I'm not the engineer of record, though, for the site plan, but I support this project. It's an eyesore, Searstown Mall is, and I really support replacing this. So if I understand correctly, on the height, you take the average of the height. So if you have 10% of the building is 90 feet and 90% of it is 74.5, you probably end up with an average around 77 feet or something, you know? And so that, to me, I think is acceptable. And that's the way I understood staff to say that you calculated that. And I actually think the shaft, the elevator shaft, if that's all that's above, it'll be much less than 10%. Like I said,
Excuse me.
I support this. I think that the building height is acceptable for the area. And I ask that you support it also, as we understand it right now. And I'd be glad to try to answer any questions. I can go back. I think Mr. Richardson asked about Titus Landing. And so the parish building is under 50 feet, so it wasn't restricted to a setback for height. The only structure there that's above the height was the flagpole at the Harley-Davidson building, and the developer there had to go through an amendment also to allow that.
What questions do other commissioners have for Mr. Honeycutt?
I did pull up that code too, if you'd like to hear about the flagpole and the UV code height requirements. It's section 28-328. In the Urban Village zoning district, the maximum height that's allowed is 50 feet, but there's a footnote and there's two additional notes that go with that. The accessory use development standards state one flagpole up to 80 feet may be installed within a project defined as having shared infrastructure or shared ingress-egress governed by a common site plan. The height shall be measured up to the top of the flagpole from the ground, regardless of mounting on the ground or on a building. And then there's a second note that says the maximum allowable height is 50 feet unless the ground floor of a residential and commercial mixed-use building is utilized as a retail space, in which case the maximum allowable height may not exceed 60 feet. Building height up to 100 feet shall only be allowed by conditional use approval, which is what we're here tonight for, and meet the standards in section 28-106. In no event shall the total height of a building/structure exceed 100 feet, including roof structures or elements affixed to the roof.
What questions do other commissioners have? Seeing none. Excuse me. Mr. Anton.
Items brought up. Do these have anything to do with us, or they don't really apply to what we're doing tonight?
Correct. He's requesting variances, and this board does not grant variance.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honeycutt. Call for questions, comments. Ms. McCotter, would you like to speak?
Good evening, Lisa McCotter, Country Club Drive. I am in support of the height, which is, of course, what we're here to talk about tonight. Not only from the point of just the overall height for the city, I think it fits in well for the area. I know that we have just nearly across the street another higher building. This, of course, is not that high, but also as a neighbor, I live right down the street. I will pass by these buildings coming and going. And so as a neighbor, I also am, this is acceptable to me to the community that I live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk, are there any cards on this item?
One more, William Castle.
Mr. Castle?
William Castle, 1400 Milton Street. I'm in support of the project. I'm the property manager there at the mall, and so I don't have much to say on it other than most of the tenants are, very excited to be moving forward with this. And the height thing, I think, is just a great benefit, not only from the design perspective, but from being able to go up, watch launches, making the most of the land, being able to mix, retail and housing. So that's all I've got to say on it.
Thank you so much. Do any commissioners have an additional question on this item? Is there, Ms. Riley?
Was there any notice given to any property owners in the area?
Yes, I believe it's 500 feet. Let me just. Yes, ma'am, 500 feet was the notification area.
In other words, were all the residents on Narvez, were they notified?
If they were within 500 feet, which I believe they are,
Is that 500 feet from the curb, or,
from the edge of the property boundary.
so they were all notified? There's none here.
Not seeing any. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Seeing none? I close the public hearing, call for a motion on this agenda item. Member Riley? Mr. Elton?
I'll move to approve CUP 1-22 with the conditions as stated, with the reference to the height calculation per the building code, and or as it relates to the setback, and the second condition related to the low impact development techniques.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Riley,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Richardson,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Aton,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairwoman Spido.
Yes. Unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Wright.
I could ask a question, Mr. Wright. When do you anticipate starting to build this? I know that the Fed has raised the interest rates half a point.
Well, I got to tell you honestly, it's difficult to keep my lender at bay because they blocked the funds on December 31st last year. If the staff is going to be going for more variances, we should have been approved back in February now.
Absolutely, I agree.
The cost of the labor has gone up to about $30 a foot. The steel has gone up, the concrete has gone up. That's if you can get the concrete. So I don't know. I really don't know whether this is going to be the final time that I'm going to be here, or are we going to be going to change the ordinance again, and whether we're going to go through another variance again. I have a meeting with the lenders tomorrow afternoon, and it's a $115 million project just on the phase one. And the city is giving me zero, as everyone knows. So I don't know where we're going to go from here at this point.
I saw that Lorenzo's is going to build at Knox McRae and US 1. I watched because I've been sick, I watch all the city meetings on TV. I have no life. I saw the Board of Adjustments and Appeals meeting, and Lorenzo's moving there. I hope you're not losing them as tenant.
Well, we have to have a timeline to take out Sears.
Yeah.
And we've already vacated nearly half of the mall. There's about almost 15, 20 tenants already moved from phase 1 to phase 2. We're putting a temporary wall in the middle of the mall. But what I can't do is demo the Sears, and then for whatever reason, this is going to take time. You have mud, you have, sand and hurricane coming in when you open up half of the mall. This isn't like the Titus Landing, which they vacated everything. It's not a vacant land like Horizon at Sandpoint. We're dealing with a lot of tenants, and I just hope that we can, make them happy. I mean, I cannot extend the leases, so that's the predicament that we're in. And let me say one other thing, because I'm on record. And I've worked with like 5 other cities. I have never worked in a city with the staff where we could not sit down and go over these incentives and say, I'll do this, this, and this. I can't do this. Can we work it out? I've just never been asked that. But I appreciate your time.
We're trying, Mr. Wright. We appreciate your patience also. Staff, if this is an inappropriate comment, please tell me, but do you anticipate additional stumbling blocks for Mr. Wright's project? And what will be the next?
Well, at this point, I think Mr. Wright mentioned 3 variances that he is seeking to approve, and so I do believe he will have at least one more public hearing. Beyond that, it would be the site plan approval.
Hang in there, Mr. Wright. Thank you, staff. Appreciate it. Moving on to 9B, CUP 3-2022, Park Avenue Baptist Church School. Staff, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit, CUP, to allow expansion of an existing private school on the campus of the Park Avenue Baptist Church at 2600 South Park Avenue. The subject property contains 19.41 acres and is currently developed as a church and associated school. The school has been operating on this site since the early 1980s, and the CUP is being requested in order to expand the school. Staff recommends approval with conditions. The first, as a condition of approval, parking for the school shall be designated by signage to ensure that school parking spaces meet the required 25-foot front setback line in the R1B zoning district. And 2, that the BTR for the school shall be annotated to prohibit special education classes for juvenile offenders, correctional facilities, drug or alcohol dependency abuse, similar type programs. So, quick summary, the campus is proposing to add additional classroom spaces, and a school in the R1B zoning district requires a conditional use permit, and since they're expanding a use that requires a CUP, that's why they have to request a CUP from.
Again, staff, can you clarify BTR?
Thank you. I was told earlier today that I need to be better about acronyms, and I did forget, so I apologize. BTR is business tax receipt, and so every business is the official city licensed operated business within the city limits.
Thank you very much. We were very confused. Any questions on staff at this point?
Chelsea, for another 3 weeks or so, I'm a customer of theirs. Is grade from, and then I'm done. Do I have any issues here?
The class of individuals affected similarly situated to you is large enough that I do not believe that there is a conflict unless you are on the staff or an employee of the business.
Mr. Alton, I thought you were going to give your daughter to me at Titusville. I think that was a promise. Okay, thank you. Member Riley.
Are any wetlands involved?
No, ma'am. The proposed portables are going over existing parking spaces.
Mr. Faison.
Was there an issue, this is for staff, about the juveniles, offenders, correctional drugs? Was that ever an issue, and why was that specifically added to this as a condition?
That was added specific to a section in the code. Let me see if I can.
Does,
It's section F on page 60 of 91.
does that also refer to a federal program assistance?
So let me just back up here.
What page again?
60 of 91.
60, thank you.
So this is in future land use policy 1.22.3, subsection F. And it says that schools shall not allow special education classes for juvenile delinquents, correctional facilities, drug or alcohol dependency abuse, or similar type programs in any residential zoning and land use designation. So since the language is in our comp plan and since the school is in a residentially zoned property, the language is being carried over from the comp plan to make sure that it is enforced through the BTR, the business tax receipt.
I don't see why that's there. But if it's not an issue for the school, then I'm okay with it. But if this is something that they were looking to pursue, I don't see why that's. And I say that because in residential settings, they have all these types of facilities are already in an educational setting. So they have homes for delinquent children in a residential setting. They already have some of this drug and alcohol dependency programs right here off of Main Street in a residential setting. I don't know why this is in there, prohibitive. I mean, again, but if they're not using this anyway, then it's no problem. But just going forward, I don't know why this is in there. That's all. This doesn't make sense. I think staff should look at taking that out or at least explaining why that's there, not just because it was there before.
Is that a question or a comment, sir? Do you want to wait?
That was just a comment.
Okay.
So he answered my question, but just going forward, I think staff should be looking at why that's there.
I understand that it's a conflict, right? So you have to put it there.
Right, so it's something in our comp plan, so it has to be enforced, and this is the enforcement mechanism. What Member Faison is suggesting is that at the next opportunity to review the comp plan, we consider whether that policy is necessary, I think.
Are you satisfied with that, Ms. Ray? Okay, very good. Okay. Do we have a card on this item?
Yes. Rodney Honeycutt.
Mr. Honeycutt, please.
Good evening. Still Rodney Honeycutt, 3700 South Washington Avenue. So as staff stated, we're asking for a conditional use permit to allow school on Park Avenue Baptist Church. And as you know, school's been there since the 80s and maybe before. And the issue was when we came in to talk about adding the modular classrooms, the staff could not find in their records that there was a special exception or a conditional use permit in file. So that means we had to apply for a conditional use permit to allow the school. And so that's why we're here. And so I'm going to just highlight some of the things. I think on page 62 and 63, you'll see a current and a future, and I hope my page numbers are the same as yours. You'll see a current traffic plan, drop off and pick up, and a proposed one for adding these modulars. And I don't know if you've been to the school, but the traffic control is enforced and it works quite well. It keeps people off of the Park Avenue, and there's plenty of backup for it. The additional classrooms do not make it exceed any levels of service. The proposed hours of operation are compatible, and they do not conflict with the church activities. And so there is ample parking. The school, as you know, has been there 40, 50 years, and there's no nuisance factors with the school now, so there won't be any with the portables added. One of the conditions, and I think it's probably is per code, is that there's a setback of 50 feet. There's no problem with our current plan for 50 feet. In the future, we might have to come back because I think that's restrictive. But we're not asking for anything on that tonight, and we couldn't without advertising. One of the conditions are that parking, and it's per code, parking has to be at least 25-foot setback, and so there'll be the parking for the school all meets that. It's well beyond 25 feet. And then the last one I'll go over is the special one for, you can't have special education classes for juvenile offenders, correctional. But they don't plan to have that, but I think that a church would be a good place to have classes like that. So I don't understand that. And so if the comp plan comes along to get amended, I'll be one of the ones standing in line to say that should be removed. But we're not asking for that. We understand that condition tonight. We need to move the conditional use permit forward. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer.
Mr. Honeycutt, you're using a plural for portables, but you only have one rectangle.
So the rectangle would include a conditional use permit area for a school. The portables will be on the the east end of that. There'll be 5 portables in the first request for site plan approval.
So they are single buildings, similar to the portables you're seeing in public schools.
Yes, and they'll be joined together. So it looked like maybe one unit, but there's 5 portables.
Oh, so in that area, there are 5 under that rectangle?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
And so, I mean, we've met with the fire marshal, the provider of the portables, and we know that they meet the fire code so that we can put them adjacent to each other.
There'll be walkways, et cetera, going back into
Yes,
the main building,
there'll be a
right?
walkway. They'll actually, they're stepped up just a little bit, so there'll be a ramp for each one, and then a walkway back to the rest of the campus.
Is there a covering in between the portables and the main building?
Currently, there's not in the site plan, there's no canopy proposed for the walkway.
I would suggest in the state of Florida, Titusville, that we have one. When children get wet, it's nasty. We put up with that every day, okay? So do you have to have another permit for that?
If we did have a canopy, there's a permit. There's a permit for the portables, just like a building permit too.
Right, okay. What questions do commissioners have on this? Just to Mr. Honeycutt? Mr. Faison?
How many additional students do you think you guys will be servicing with these additional portals?
So that'd be about 100.
Mr. Aton?
So the way I heard it, the current school is non-conforming because the CUP isn't there. So once this CUP is granted, does it also apply to the school that's currently there in case they need to do something, improve that or whatever, so it's not a non-conforming project?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Except for the 8th. No, I'm kidding.
What's your current enrollment? I guess I should ask the gentleman in
Yeah.
the back. You're in good business, aren't
For
you?
the new school year. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Just want to look at my competition in the eye. Okay. Is that all? Any additional comments? Any additional questions? Okay.
Thank you
Additional
very much.
cards? Thank you, Mr. Honeycutt.
Yep. William Shivers.
Mr. Schiffers?
Good evening. William Shivers. I reside at 3735 Chiara Drive, which is just across the street from the city limits, but I also operate a business at 6285 Vector Space or Riverfront Center Boulevard. In full disclosure, I do have a business here in town. We are working with the school and the church to help them through this on a pro bono basis, so we're not receiving any compensation. We're just trying to assist them in getting these portables in time for the next school year. I'm a lifelong resident of Brevard County. I was born and raised in the central part of the county, but I've spent the majority of my life up here in North Brevard. Moved here to Titusville for two specific reasons. I had a young daughter, and I wanted her to go to Astronaut High School when she reached high school age, and I wanted her to go to Park Avenue Christian Academy. So we moved here over 40-something years ago. Been a member of Park Avenue Baptist Church for about 37 years now. And as you guys know, Park Avenue's been a pillar of this community for over 50 years now. And I'm not sure exactly what year the Park Avenue Baptist Church started, or Christian Academy started, excuse me, but I know it's been in existence for over 37 years. So my daughter started there as a kindergartner and went through 8th grade. And I now have two grandchildren. One just graduated 8th grade last year, and I have a 7th grader there. So it's been a very important part of my family. And like Mr. Ayton, I believe my grandkids and my daughter got an exceptional education at that facility. It offers an outstanding education for children in our community, and it's a safe place. So I really am a big supporter of that institution there that we have. I consider it a place of excellence. It was interesting. I saw a social media post a couple weeks ago, and a lady said, "I'm moving to Titusville. I want to put my child in private education. Can you make me a recommendation?" And I don't really participate that much in social media, but I was very interested in the responses. And there was probably close to 100 responses. And I have to tell you that probably 80% recommended to this lady that she strongly consider Park Avenue Christian Academy. So it is obviously well thought of in our community. And due to the growth, as we just mentioned, we're now at capacity at the academy. We have children on a waiting list, and again, have over 100 students that we need to make room for. So we are doing everything we possibly can to make way for these classrooms to be in place shortly after the school year starts in the fall, and very much in favor of it, and I would appreciate your support tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next card, please.
Steve Uke.
Mr. Uke. Did I pronounce it correctly? Uke?
Yes, thank you. It is not yuck. It is uke.
Uke.
I
Okay.
appreciate that. I'm the pastor of Park Avenue Baptist Church. You probably want to move this from me because more words will handheld microphone. I would like to, before I speak, have clarification on what you brought up, sir, with regard to the juvenile delinquents. And could you please explain that the process we are going through here is going to apply to the church facility?
Yes, sir. Sorry, we were looking for a plan related to that, actually. But so since it's a policy in the comprehensive plan that schools be limited if they are in a residential zoning district, the way to enforce that is through your business tax receipt, your occupational license. And so when you apply for a BTR, that will be the limitation on your license. If you're in violation of the license, then it can be revoked. You would not be able to operate.
So the school is Park Avenue Baptist Church. It's not a separate entity. So are you saying that we cannot have addiction recovery services or anything like that that operate in our church facilities?
So I know that in general practice, businesses may have different operations and may require multiple BTRs for the activities that are conducted at any particular commercial entity or property. And for your scenario situation, you would have probably multiple BTRs, and one would be specific to the school, and another would be for any other use you may do, such as church-related activities. So it specifically says the recommendation in this CUP for the church, or for the school, says the BTR for the school, so it would be the school, the educational component, shall be annotated. So specifically the business tax receipt for the school's activities shall be annotated to prohibit special education classes for juvenile offenders, correctional facilities, drug or alcohol dependency abuse, or similar type programs. Now, that said, I and Eddie are currently researching where in the comp plan that language exists because we want to verify that we are following the comp plan verbatim. And I haven't put my fingers on it yet. So there is a possibility that there's room for the council to make an amendment to the recommended condition for that, unless we can find the language there in the comp plan. But I think that the BTR would be specific for the school and not for the other church activities, would probably operate under a different BTR. It's tax exempt, but you have a BTR to do the church activities probably separate. I can't verify that because I haven't seen that either, but that's typically how commercial activities operate if there's multiple different things going on.
And then just to add to that, the policy that we cited that has that language in it is specific to elementary, middle, and high schools. So if we're looking at whether the church can allow those types of uses, the policy is specific to the schools cannot offer those services.
I'd like to add something. With the term special education, you're going into federal statutes. So I don't know whether, and I think that term special education then pulls you into a total federal legislation that you may or may not want to be in.
Sure. I think that goes back to Member Fason's recommendation of analyzing this policy at the next review of the comp plan.
Yeah, and
The language and
analyze the
whether it's
language,
necessary.
yeah, that you're using there too. Yes.
Okay.
I have a feeling that you're talking about counseling classes for drug offenders or alcoholics or marriage counseling or all of those that usually a faith-based community offers within
ma'am.
your facilities. That's what you're talking about.
Right, and the
Okay.
way that it is worded sounds like it applies to the whole property.
It does, but there is the term special education, which sends up flags with me. So.
And is your flag in our favor or against us?
I don't know. It depends on whether you want that or not. I think I would investigate the language. I think that comment should be to staff on the term special education.
One, again, not related to the special education term, but the proposed condition number 2 is specific to the BTR for the school. And so if you're still looking to provide those services through the church, that's not what the staff is recommending through this condition tonight for the CUP.
Okay, thank you.
Now that we're totally confused. I have one question. You said K through 8 today. That's what you're doing today. You got
Yes.
K through 8. Are you expanding to a 9th grade center?
No,
You're not. So you're keeping it
there's
K.
no plans currently. I can't promise for the future.
So
but
you're just expanding because of enrollment.
The church has grown in the last couple of years by more than 50%. The school has grown in the last 4 years by more than 50%. We have long waiting lists, both at our preschool programs all the way up through. Lots of folks moving into Titusville, as you know. And this year, we could have had more than 5 kindergarten classes if we had opened it up.
Wow.
But we're capped at 3 for each grade. So we're trying to do the best that we can. We have endless amounts of positive comments that come back to us on the quality of education that the families get. And so we're trying to meet every aspect of the code. There's nothing that we're asking for necessarily in leniency. We just want to put 5 portables in to try and meet what we need to do for next year and the year after.
Thank you. Additional questions from other commissioners, please. Mr. Anton.
Do we have to do the second condition? Is it implied by the comp plan or, I mean, I agree with everybody else. It seems like it's borderline overreach. Have the ability to leave that condition off or not?
I truly believe that it depends on what the comp plan language states, and I apologize that I do not have it at the ready to recite to you. And I believe that staff needs to provide that prior to the council meeting. And given, assuming that it does exist, then that condition would need to apply because it needs to, the granting of the CUP needs to be consistent with the comp plan. You can't authorize actions that are inconsistent with the comp plan. And so pending verification of the policy language, I would say that is required language. Now, that assumes that it exists. If it doesn't exist, then council has the freedom to remove that second condition. That would be my comment in response to your question.
So,
Does that mean, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Antoine, go ahead.
so if we're silent on it, if we're required and it does exist, then it applies because it's required to be applied. And if we find out that it is quoted or doesn't exist or whatever, and we're silent on it, is that any?
I would recommend that if you are inclined to grant the approval for the CUP, that you adopt the recommended conditions that staff has provided with the additional caveat that that policy be verified. And then that policy will be verified prior to being presented to City Council, and then they will have that language to work with at their hearing.
Or we'd have to table the entire situation.
That is another option that would delay the application, and that's up to you all and the applicant.
And that's a delay. Right. Mr. Faison, please.
First, thank you for you in the area of education.
Thank you.
As you've noticed, Titusville is growing. A lot of parents want their children to have a quality education. So as you grow for these 5 portables, I hope that there's future growth plans already being processed as well. I'm sure you're going to need them sooner than later, much sooner. To the staff. So one of the things that, remember, Akon here had said, and I believe it's the way that I'm leaning, is that if I were to say that I approve this, could I strike number 2 and only go with condition number 1?
You can make that recommendation, the commission can. However, if the policy is in the comprehensive plan, it is still enforceable.
And it would ultimately be the same situation would result at the City Council hearing, where they would analyze what you all have looked at and made the final decision, because your recommendation goes to them to approve or modify, as they see fit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Is there an additional speaker? Nope.
One question, Jan.
Okay. Member Riley, do you need Mr. Yurt to come back?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Just one question, and it has nothing to do with how I'm going to vote or anything, but what's the lifespan of the portable? Like, how long do you think you'll be using those? No.
That is a great question. Can you answer that? What's the normal? Tyler Buckley is our executive director.
Can you identify yourself, sir?
Sure. Tyler Buckley, live on Park Avenue, executive director of the church. These are refurbished portables. Every time they get used by the company, they get sent back to the manufacturer. They get spruced up again, put back out. I've never heard. It would be pure guess and speculation on my part, but I would imagine 20 or more years easily if they're taken care of. And we do have future plans for growth in the context that we know that we're going to be growing. And so this is just helping us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I have another question. So you're leasing these, you're not building these.
That is correct.
So all you're doing is providing the footing and strapping them down and putting the walkways in and not putting the overheads in?
Plus
Okay.
utilities and stuff like
Okay.
that. Yes, ma'am.
Now, do they have toilet facilities or do they have running water in them?
Each one has a bathroom and a sink.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And, okay, I think that's my additional comments from commissioners. Additional questions? Thank you so much. I think we do that in the anteroom. Yeah, I think that's.
So I do have a
yeah.
question
Yeah.
based on that. Since you brought up theology, do you happen to know what today is?
Do I know what today is?
Do you know what today? What makes today special?
Let's see, May 4th. It's not my parents' anniversary. I'm not sure, sir.
This is not High Holy Day,
Okay,
Mr.
so let me
Faison.
help you. Today is National Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, that is. And it's teacher appreciation, too. Thank you. Please do. Okay. We appreciate it. Okay. Commissioners, what is your pleasure? Mr. Faison?
I make a motion that we approve conditional use permit 3-22 for a school at 2600 South Park Avenue Baptist Church.
With or without condition, sir?
With condition only number 1, striking condition number 2.
Roll call vote, please.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Riley,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Richardson,
Yes.
Member Perez.
Yes.
Member Aton,
Yes.
Chairwoman Spido.
No. I think there's some additional construction things that need to be looked into. That's my reason. Thank you so much. Okay. Motion passes. Going to City Council summary of action, please. No, wait, I can't do that yet. Have to go to petitions and requests from the public present. Well, you don't know that. I forget this every single month, and then you yell at me, and I get kicked under the table. So I'm saying it now. Petitions and requests from the public present. City staff,
No report.
city attorney.
It's been real, guys. Richard Broom will be here at your next meeting.
Ooh, ouch. Okay. He better tolerate me. Member commissioners, anyone with additional comments?
I do.
Vice Chair Richardson.
Yes, when we go through this conditional use permits, I keep thinking about the 80s when I was on the commission as chairman, that one-stop permitting. We had, Truman Scarborough was mayor and he advocated that. Somebody like Mr. Wright would come in and everybody meet with him at one time to find out what his needs were instead of a roadblock every step along the way. And in the case of Park Avenue CUP, I think that's too much language. If you really considered how many churches in Titusville are doing what they're doing, you'd probably find that a lot of them are against the language of the comp plan. So I think we need to really go back to one-stop permitting. And in cases such as Mr. Wright's, that's taken him way too long. It's taken him way too long compared to what it took Titus Landings. Of course, the rules are different now. And I'm afraid we're spinning ourselves out of control with all these regulations. Maybe we need to look again at the comp plan and the language and simplify the language of the comp plan.
Comment well taken, Mr. Richardson. Mr. Alton.
Number one, I wasn't expecting that, but I fully, whether it's, Tiger teams or staff has more, whatever. Mine was more, my original question was, do our comments as it relates to the CUP, specifically Park Avenue, and the comp plan references, do those go back to council without them having to watch the video to see it? Can that be in the record that it's transmitted to them. Also, I know for land use, we change comp plans and that's generated by an applicant. What needs to happen and what does the next review of the comp plan look like as far as moving something like this forward? Probably most people oversight and comp plan to have verbiage like.
So a general statement or opinion by the commission doesn't get sent to city council. That would be more of a recommendation, a motion from the commission. As far as the comprehensive plan, the state requires that the city review the comprehensive plan every 7 years through the EAR report, the evaluation and appraisal report. And so at a minimum, we're looking at the code or the comp plan every 7 years. On top of that, City Council gave staff direction to start adopting portions of the comp plan. If you remember, the city staff had been working with the commission, presenting you several versions of a proposed 2020 comp plan, or excuse me, 2040 comp plan. And the recommendation from council was to adopt portions of it. And so we will be making changes to the comp plan, and that may be a good opportunity to review those policies as well.
Vice Chair Richardson, please.
No, I'll just,
Okay, thank you.
Just
Mr.
to follow-
Faison, please.
Recently, I've met with some members of our community. And as the frustration that you're hearing down this panel has been echoed in our community, that it is difficult to do business with Titusville. We're hearing that time and time again. We have to find a way to make this easier, more transparent, and in regular language folks understand. But having Mr. Wright, as we all know, this is just taking way too long. And not just with Mr. Wright, but in a lot of areas, that getting somebody through this process is dragging them through the. We have to do better. We have to do better. And I don't know I don't know what it takes. I don't know how to get there, but we have to do that. Like I said, the community right now is upset. I can tell you personally that having a jet ski rental business in Titusville is not happening. And that's my business. And I have been beat up about this because of one, concerns out at Parish Park, that the county's done what they've done. They've worked with the city for what they've done. And I just can't do business. And all I want to do is just simply have a concession at Parish Park and rent jet skis. And I'm not able to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Faison. I will echo Mr. Richardson and Mr. Faison's comment. We are very close, and the frustration of Mr. Wright this evening. This is the first time I've heard this much frustration out of a person who is almost gifting our city with something that is greatly needed. And I'd like to go on the record in saying that we are very close to losing an improvement to this city that is very, very needed. He could walk away in a heartbeat, or his finances could be drying up, especially with the increase of both building materials, the availability of building materials, and the raise in interest rates today. So whatever influence you have with staff to pull this through, it appears to be nitpicking this man. I know that we have to follow through with the regulations that we have, but this is the second, I think, very ridiculous time that this man has had to fly in again and appeal. So I hope he quickly gets things moved quickly. Amen. Thank you. I have one more item, 11A, City Council Summary of Action. What's the pleasure of the commissioners, please? Anybody have a pleasure of looking at this? Mr. Richardson, look at this for me, please. It's just information. Do we accept it? Nope.
I move we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Richardson, I hope you get well by in 2 weeks, okay? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. This is not record time, but it's close to it. Look up at that clock, guys. Come on.